Picture this. You're standing in the marble corridors of Alexandria's royal palace in 30 BC, and you hear screams echoing from the dungeons below. The sound chills your blood because you know that Cleopatra VII, the legendary Queen of Egypt, is dispensing justice in ways that would make even the most hardened Roman executioner turn away in horror. Everyone thinks they know Cleopatra as the seductive queen who captivated Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. But what I'm about to reveal will shatter that romanticized image forever. Behind her beauty and intelligence lurked a ruler whose cruelty knew no bounds, who devised punishments so savage that they became whispered legends throughout the ancient world. If you're fascinated by the dark secrets of history that textbooks won't tell you, hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking historical truths. And let me know in the comments, which punishment do you think was the most terrifying? To understand the depths of Cleopatra's brutality, we need to step back into the blood-soaked world of Ptolemaic Egypt. For 3 centuries, her dynasty had ruled through a combination of divine authority and sheer terror. Cleopatra VII inherited not just a throne, but a legacy of violence that she would perfect into an art form. The queen faced constant threats, rebellious nobles, Roman interference, and subjects who questioned her divine right to rule. In a world where showing weakness meant death, Cleopatra chose to rule through fear so absolute that even mentioning her name incorrectly could seal your fate. Her palace guards whispered that she kept detailed records of each execution method, studying their effectiveness like a scholar studying philosophy. But Cleopatra's genius lay not just in her cruelty, but in her theatricality. She understood that a punishment witnessed was worth 10 punishments whispered about. Every execution became a performance, every scream a message to potential enemies that this queen would stop at nothing to maintain her power. The first of her savage punishments was burning alive, but not the quick death you might imagine. Can you picture the horror of being slowly roasted over specially designed bronze braziers? Cleopatra's executioners had perfected the technique of keeping victims conscious for as long as possible. They would position the condemned just far enough from the flames to avoid immediate death, allowing the heat to gradually cook them while they remained fully aware. According to Plutarch's accounts, the queen would sometimes attend these executions personally, studying the victims' faces with the cold curiosity of a natural philosopher. The condemned would be stripped naked and bound to prevent them from throwing themselves into the flames for a quicker death. Some victims lasted for hours, their screams gradually weakening as dehydration and shock set in. What makes this punishment even more chilling is that Cleopatra reserved it for those who had served her faithfully but had somehow disappointed her. Imagine being a loyal servant who made a single mistake, only to face this agonizing end while the queen you had served watched with academic interest. The second method, thrown to crocodiles, transformed those sacred animals of the Nile into instruments of royal vengeance. But these weren't random crocodile attacks. Cleopatra had created specialized pools where starved crocodiles waited for their human prey. The condemned would be lowered slowly into these pools, their legs dangling just within reach of the snapping jaws below. The true horror lay in the anticipation. Victims could see the reptiles circling below, could hear their powerful jaws snapping at the air. Some prisoners would be left suspended for days, watching the crocodiles grow more aggressive with hunger. When they were finally lowered completely, death rarely came quickly. Crocodiles are notorious for their death rolls, spinning their victims underwater until drowning mercifully ended their suffering. Dio Cassius recorded that Cleopatra would invite foreign dignitaries to witness these executions, turning them into diplomatic statements. The message was clear. This is what happens to those who cross the divine pharaoh of Egypt. Perhaps most terrifying of all was her use of execution by venomous animals. Cleopatra, fascinated by poisons and their effects, had assembled a collection of deadly creatures that read like a nightmare bestiary. Cobras, scorpions, poisonous spiders, and exotic snakes from the farthest reaches of her empire, all carefully maintained for her gruesome purposes. The condemned would be placed in sealed chambers with these creatures, But here's where Cleopatra's sadistic creativity truly shone. She would often use multiple animals with different types of venom, creating a cocktail of toxins that would affect the body in stages. First might come the paralysis from a cobra bite, followed by the burning agony of scorpion stings, while the victim remained conscious enough to feel every moment. Some victims would be partially treated with antidotes, prolonging their suffering for days. Ancient texts describe prisoners begging for death, while their bodies shut down piece by piece. The queen reportedly kept detailed notes on which combinations of venoms produced the most interesting effects, treating her victims like test subjects in a grotesque experiment. Used as live target practice, elevated archery training into a spectacle of systematic torture. Picture elite guards of the royal army lining up with their bows, while bound prisoners stood at varying distances. But this wasn't about quick kills. It was about precision and prolongation. The archers would aim for non-vital areas first. An arrow through the shoulder, another through the thigh, carefully avoiding major arteries. The goal was to create maximum pain while keeping the victim conscious and upright for as long as possible. Some prisoners would be turned into human pincushions, bristling with dozens of arrows before merciful death finally claimed them. Cleopatra would sometimes participate herself, her legendary accuracy with a bow becoming part of her fearsome reputation. Foreign ambassadors wrote of seeing her calmly notch arrow after arrow into screaming prisoners, her face showing no more emotion than if she were hunting gazelles in the desert. The practice of mutilation revealed perhaps the most calculating aspect of Cleopatra's cruelty. Rather than quick execution, she would order the systematic removal of body parts, ears, tongues, noses, hands, in carefully planned sequences designed to maximize both physical and psychological trauma. A lying courtier might first lose their tongue, then their ears, so they could neither speak falsehoods nor hear the whispers of conspiracy. A thieving merchant would watch their hands being severed one finger at a time, each amputation cauterized to prevent death from blood loss. The process could take weeks, with victims kept alive and conscious throughout their ordeal. The mutilated survivors became living warnings throughout Alexandria. These broken figures, unable to speak or hear, would wander the streets as testament to their queen's merciless justice. Their very existence spread terror more effectively than any proclamation could. The judgment of Maat represented Cleopatra's twisted interpretation of ancient Egyptian justice. In traditional belief, the heart of the deceased was weighed against the feather of Maat, goddess of truth and justice. Cleopatra perverted this sacred ritual into a form of psychological torture that broke minds before it destroyed bodies. Prisoners would be subjected to elaborate mock trials where their crimes were weighed against increasingly absurd standards. They would be forced to confess to imaginary sins while priests chanted funeral rites around them. The psychological pressure was unbearable. Many victims went insane before their eventual execution. The true cruelty lay in false hope. Some prisoners would be told they had passed the judgment, only to face even worse punishments supposedly mandated by the gods themselves. This divine authorization for cruelty allowed Cleopatra to commit atrocities while claiming religious justification. Tied and left to die under the sun sounds simple, but Cleopatra's version was refined torture science. Victims would be staked out naked in the desert, but positioned so that the sun's rays would hit them at the most agonizing angles throughout the day. Their bonds were designed to cut deeper as they struggled, creating additional sources of pain. The condemned would be given just enough water to prevent quick death from dehydration, sometimes drops placed on their lips by guards who would then withdraw before they could drink properly. Vultures would circle overhead, occasionally landing to peck at the still living victims. Death could take over a week, with prisoners slowly cooking under the relentless Egyptian sun, while their minds shattered from isolation and agony. The final punishment, torn apart by animals, represented the ultimate fusion of Cleopatra's love for spectacle and her genius for prolonged suffering. But these weren't wild beasts attacking randomly. They were specially trained animals that had been conditioned to inflict maximum damage while keeping victims alive as long as possible. Lions, leopards, and wild dogs were taught to attack specific body parts in sequence. They would begin with extremities, gradually working toward vital organs, while handlers used whips and commands to control the pace of destruction. Some victims would be partially devoured over the course of hours, remaining conscious as their own bodies were consumed before their eyes. The queen would often host elaborate dinner parties during these executions, her guests dining on roasted meats, while human screams provided the evening's entertainment. Foreign diplomats wrote in horror of these events, describing Cleopatra laughing delightedly as she watched prisoners being literally eaten alive. But here's what makes Cleopatra's story even more chilling. She didn't just order these punishments, she innovated them. Historical records suggest she personally designed many of these torture methods, combining her extensive knowledge of human anatomy with a creativity that belonged in nightmares rather than throne rooms. As her reign progressed and Roman pressure mounted, her punishments became even more elaborate and horrifying. It was as if she knew her time was running out and wanted to leave a legacy of terror that would outlast her dynasty. She succeeded beyond her wildest dreams or darkest nightmares. The irony is devastating when you consider how history remembers her. We see the beautiful queen in Hollywood movies, the tragic heroine of Shakespeare's plays, the brilliant ruler who spoke 9 languages and commanded the loyalty of 2 Roman generals. But we forget the screams that echoed through her palaces, the broken bodies that lined her dungeons, the absolute terror that her subjects lived with every single day. In the end, Cleopatra's savage punishments reveal a fundamental truth about absolute power. It doesn't just corrupt, it transforms rulers into monsters who view human suffering as entertainment. Her victims numbered in the thousands, each one a testament to what happens when intelligence and cruelty combine in a single person who believes themselves to be divine. The next time you hear Cleopatra's name, remember this. Behind every legend of beauty and seduction lies a much darker reality. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who smile while they devour their prey. What do you think drove Cleopatra to such extremes of cruelty? Was it the pressure of maintaining power in a hostile world? Or something darker lurking in the human heart? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more shocking historical truths that will change how you see the ancient world forever.